Happy 4th of July. Now, it's an important day for our country. You know, as many of you know, it's my birthday today. So, thank you. I'm excited to be able to preach to you guys on my birthday and share some scriptures, with my family here. So thank you. I want to ask you a favor. Since it's my birthday, I turned 28 today. If you hate my sermon, just do me a favor. Don't tell me till tomorrow. The last time I preached live to this crowd, the Detroit Church of Christ, that was March 2020. It was March 7th. That was our last Sunday at Vista Tech before the pandemic. And so I've been doing a lot of pre-recorded services since then. A few of them that you've seen online on Facebook and YouTube. And so that's what I'm used to. So if you see me awkwardly staring into the camera, or if I repeat myself multiple times, making the same point, I'm just trying to go for the best take. I'm sorry, it's a force of habit. So, it's been quite a couple of months for me and my family. I want to share some things with you. So, we've had quite a busy month. So a month before baby Catherine came, that's my newest daughter. Yeah, baby Catherine's here. A month before she came, at Corinne's doctor's appointment, Corinne's doctor told us that we should be ready for this baby to come at any moment. And so, we're at that moment we're on high alert. Right. We are ready for this baby to come. I'm gonna get in the shade. And so, have you ever been on high alert? Like maybe you've got some guests coming and like you don't know when they're gonna arrive and you're scrambling around the house trying to get ready to make things presentable. Or maybe you've got an Amazon package coming, it's really important. And so you're awkwardly already standing by the door while the Amazon person comes up and you're like, you open the door while they're right there and they're like surprised. But we were on high alert. I felt like Steve Martin in Father of the Bride too, if you've seen it, where he's scrambling around in the last month or so before the babies were born, and he's losing it. That was me. I was definitely losing it. I was going crazy. And we just like in the movie had a couple false alarms. The false alarms where we are rushing to the hospital. We think like today's the day, the baby's coming, it's coming, and we're on the way to the hospital, and then they turn us away. And one of those times, Illuminate probably still doesn't even believe me. I had to cancel our lunch plans on him. And the baby didn't even come for like a month later. So he made that up. We also have been preparing for several weddings, in the meantime. And so, really exciting time for us. A lot of our friends getting married. And so, one of the first ones we were preparing for, Mike George, great friend of mine from our time in campus ministry. If you know Mike, his parents are the Georges in Grand Rapids. He moved out to LA not that long ago after he graduated. We were roommates all through college, and so he asked me to be his best man. I'm so excited. I was so excited to be able to, and honored to be able to plan some things for him and just have a great time with the guys out in LA. And so, in the meantime, while I'm doing all this planning, we don't know when Catherine's coming. Right. And so I'm worried that I'm making all these plans that I won't even be able to be there to enjoy and spend that time with Mike. But God worked it all out. Catherine came May 21st, 11:59, and I was able to go to Mike's wedding, which was on June 13th. And just a few days before I was getting ready to go out to that wedding, Corinne's she's healing, she's feeling up to going out, and she wants to go to the grocery store as a family, just have a good family trip out to the grocery store. And so we pack up the car, we pack up the girls, and we're all ready to go. On the way out the front door, Corinne fractures her foot. And so if you see, she's over there in the boot. And so, a few days before, I'm leaving for this wedding, Corinne's getting fitted for a boot. And, I've heard the jokes from all you guys about how I got a wife at home with 2 kids and a broken foot, and I'm off to go party in LA. It definitely, thank you guys, but it definitely didn't make me feel any better about leaving. So,
come on, Andrew.
The next wedding that we were preparing for is that of Jasmine Pearson and Chris Holt, the one from Wisconsin. In case you're thinking he got married twice. So we were excited about that one. That was Corinne's college roommate in our time in the campus ministry. Great friends of ours, and so we were super excited for their wedding. It was a beautiful wedding. The food was great. And I only got a little bit of barbecue sauce on my tie. So, the rest got on my shirt though. And the next wedding that we're preparing for is now Chris and Sandy, soon to be the Phillips. Great friends of ours from campus ministry, and also great disciples in the singles ministry here. And so we're super excited. I'll do my best not to get any food on myself at that wedding. Corinne and I, we are overjoyed to be able to be witness to the birth of our daughter. And then even more weddings this summer. Great friends of ours, all these weddings have already taken place. Just to see God blessing our friends. They've been faithful, and now they're being blessed with great spouses, and they all marrying faithful disciples. It's just so exciting to see this. Today I want to talk about the amazing, abundant, fulfilling, joyful, and free life that we can have in God.
All right, come on.
I want to take us through the life of Daniel and show, the Daniel, the character from the Old Testament, inspiring guy, and show how we can have a joyful, fulfilling, and abundant life despite our circumstances, just like Daniel. And so why does this matter? Despite living in a post-Declaration of Independence America, the default condition for each of us is still not freedom.
Right.
We can easily get caught as slaves to our culture and to our sinful lives, and we can end up with an underwhelming and guilt-ridden life. You guys, but that is not the plan that God has for us.
Right.
Now, I want to take us through Daniel's journey. I want to do that. I want to set us up for the world that he was in.
Okay.
Daniel was a young man, maybe even a boy, during the time of the exile of Judah.
Yeah.
This is when the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the largest, biggest, baddest empire of the day, up until that time, came and they took over Judah.
Yeah.
Now, this is what they would do. They would capture people groups and they would move them all around Babylon. What they would do is they would make them separated, so they didn't have the organization, they didn't have the resources to stage any kind of a rebellion because they've been transplanted. And this is what happened in the Bible to the people of Judah. What they would do is with Daniel, the journey he most likely took was from Jerusalem to Babylon, and that was over 700 miles. And this is a forced march. I want to ask you guys, I want to take a quick poll here. Who has walked over 5 miles in one stretch? Raise your hand. All right. Now, keep your hands up if you've gone over 10 miles in one stretch. All right, more hands went up. Okay, interesting. All right, drop your hands if you have not walked over 15 miles in one stretch. All right, we've got a few hikers out there. All right, 20, 30. Wow, I still see some hands. Okay, 40. All right, hands are down. I got to hear about that 40-mile hike, though. All right, so, in January, my Uncle Bob called me. He wanted to take me on a hike, and we were going to be hiking part of the North Country Trail. Now, this is a trail that stretches from New York all the way to, I believe, South Dakota, and it stretches all the northern states in between there. And so we were going to hike just a small stretch of it. And he said it was about 10 to 15 miles. I'm thinking, that sounds great. I love hiking, and if you can do it, I can do it. And so we go out, and I meet him there. We start hiking about 5 miles in. I'm like, this is probably more than I would normally walk in like a week. And so I'm already feeling this. And then 8 miles in, I'm starting to feel the actual, the pain in my legs from walking 8 miles. And the terrain was a little bit hillier than I thought. We had a great conversation, so I wasn't even thinking about it. And so, then we keep going, and it's about 10 miles in, and I'm feeling the pain now, and I'm trying not to show it. I don't want him to see that in my eyes. And then 12 miles in, I'm walking with a visible limp as we're hiking, and he's like looking at me, and he's like, "You all right?" And I'm like, "I'm doing great, just great, great weather, this beautiful hike." He's like, "Oh yeah, beautiful hike. Let's keep going." And so now 14 miles in, I'm dying, like head to toe, I'm sore, and it's not even the next day yet. I'm already feeling it. And then we can see the buildings though of the city or the town that we were hiking to. So I know the end is coming up. I just don't quite know how much longer we got. And then we get into the town, and my uncle's like, "Hey, let me, there's some great monuments in town and some cool statues. I want to show you around town. So let's." And I'm like, my knees buckling, and I'm like, "Just let me sit on this fire hydrant for a second." And he's like, "You all right?" "Yeah, I'm doing great." And so we walk all around town, and I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm gonna die. And then, I hadn't hiked like that in forever. And so I get into my car, and I start driving back home. I get home. And I can barely move because I'm stiff now. And I get out of the car and I'm walking like a cowboy up to the front door. And then I barely get on the porch. I'm so weak, I can't even reach my hands into my pockets to grab my house keys. And so I just knock on the front door. And I just wait. And then Corinne opens the door, sees me, and laughs. And then it's all I can do to grab onto the door frame and just climb in over the threshold. And so I can only imagine how Daniel felt being force marched 700 miles through Mesopotamia. I don't want that to happen to me again. I've been working on it. I've been trying to get my hiking up. And so, next week I've actually got a hike with George Alexander picked out. And so I'm excited for that. We got a 15-mile loop picked out. So pray for me. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, they would enslave the nobility of the people they captured, and they would force them to serve the empire.
Right.
They would teach them the culture and the religion of Babylon, and to add insult to injury, they would give them new names that honored the gods of Babylon.
Right.
Super disrespectful, especially some Hebrews.
Yeah.
If anyone had an excuse to be upset, if anyone had the excuse to give up on God, it was Daniel. So how do we relate? How do we relate to Daniel? How do we relate to the exiles, you might ask? We live in the land of the free. Our right to pursue happiness is enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, right? Yeah, that may be so. In John 10:10, though, Jesus says, "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." What does it mean to have a full life? Wow. Some translations say life abundant. Some say life to the fullest. All that sounds great to me. I want to explain this full life. A life lived with God is a free and full life. An abundant life doesn't mean that we will always have an abundance of material possessions.
Right.
A full life doesn't mean that your bank account's going to look full all the time. A free life doesn't mean that you're not responsible for the choices that you make, despite what our culture might tell us. Saying YOLO before we do something doesn't remove us from the consequences of our decisions.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what is a life to the full? Let's see what Scripture says. Psalm 16:11 says to God, "You make known to me the path of life. You fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand." A full life comes from God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you are living a life to the fullest right now? Do you feel like you're living life to the fullest? When Daniel first got to Babylon, he would face the first trial that was recorded in the book of Daniel, the book named after him. He and the other young nobles that were in captivity were being served food from the king, and for whatever reason, that it was, Daniel and some of the other Hebrew boys felt as though it would be dishonoring to God to partake in the meat and the wine that was being offered to them, and so they wouldn't do it. Now, they had to talk to the officials who were providing this food. They had a bold conversation. They had to negotiate. They had to negotiate with these officials for a 10-day trial period. And now, thanks to Daniel, Netflix comes standard with a trial period as well. No, I'm just joking. What would have happened, if you didn't do this? The officials didn't want them to appear weaker. And so that's why they had to negotiate. But the Hebrew boys, they were going to boldly trust in God, pray for the outcome, and just trust that God would do the rest. Let's pick it up in Daniel 1 verse 15 and see what happens.
Okay, come on.
At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. Let's skip down to verse 18. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them and found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in the whole kingdom.
Yes.
You guys, Daniel learned early that stepping out onto faith, trusting in God, is rewarded by God.
Yes.
The sooner that we learn that, the better it's going to go for us. But as some of you know, the only way to really learn this is to experience it for ourselves.
Right.
You guys, next, living for God becomes the reward.
Come on.
How is that? Psalm 37 verse 4 says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun." You guys, someone could explain this type of trust to you, but many of you already know this can only be learned through experience,
Yeah.
through trusting in God and
right.
seeing what happens.
That's right.
Who here wears prescription glasses?
Oh my God.
That's a lot of us. I remember the first time I wanted prescription glasses. I was house sitting for my grandpa, and his TV was rather far from the couch, and I was trying to play video games, but it was difficult to see from that far away. And so, I call and I go get my eyes examined, and I had known that this was an issue for a long time through high school and college. I could hardly ever see the board or what the teachers were writing on it, but it wasn't an issue until now. This was getting in the way between me and video games, and so I get the call. I go to pick up my prescription. And if you're an adult who's gotten glasses as an adult, you remember where you were when you first put on those glasses. I was at Costco Optical in Ann Arbor, and I grabbed my prescription. I put them on for the first time. I had no idea there was so much detail to see in the world from a distance. I'm looking. The TV displays crisp and clear, just as intended. I look up at there's a pillar. Very distinctly, I remember this in the store. There's a pillar, and about 20 feet up on that pillar, I saw like some detailed writing on the pillar that must have been there for a long time. And without my glasses, I would never seen that. It's like all this detail. When we trust in God, then He shows us, and then we see it.
Yeah. Come on.
We too are in a type of Babylon, just like Daniel.
Yeah.
Just like Daniel, our culture doesn't truly support us living the Christian lifestyle the way the Bible describes it.
Right.
You may see that. And so how do we live in our Babylon? Well, the exiles, they had their scriptures in Jeremiah 29, verse 4. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. I'm going to skip down to verse 7. Also, seek the peace and prosperity to the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper.
Yeah.
This is a long-term plan.
Right.
God had a long-term plan. It's not all about white-knuckling it until we get out of Babylon. It's not all about toughing it out, trying our best until we get to heaven. It's about making humanity better through our lives and through our actions.
Amen.
Daniel was living this out, and we'll see more. We may have to abstain from some of the practices of our neighbors, our coworkers, maybe even our family at times.
Sure.
And we, as Christians, are going to be the ones who stand up when everyone else is bowing down to the idols of consumerism,
Yes.
comfort, and misplaced identity.
That's right.
As disciples, we have the freedom in Christ to live life to the fullest.
Yeah.
Daniel, he was in Babylon, and he lived for God no matter what the consequences. I truly believe that the disciple life is the best way to live. The way that the Bible describes the life of a Christian, I believe it's the best way to live.
Come on.
It leads to a full life, and Daniel, he had a full life.
Come on.
Daniel had been captured. He grew up in a sinful empire that enslaved his people, and yet he chose to be righteous and honor God, and God blessed him. And He used Daniel to do great, amazing things. Don't you want to be used?
Yeah.
I want to take a look at the highlights of Daniel's life. I'm going to read them. In Daniel chapter 2, he spoke boldly to the king of the empire, and God moved the king to respect and listen to him. Daniel's actions saved the lives of pagan magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers from certain death. These weren't even his people, and he was giving them a second chance at life. In Daniel 4, he refused to shy away from speaking about God, and this led the pagan kings to worship God. In chapter 5, God blessed Daniel with so much wisdom because Daniel showed himself to be competent and trustworthy and trusted in him, and he was rising through the ranks of now even the Persian Empire. Now this, in the next chapter, made the officials so jealous that they concocted a plan to have Daniel either dishonor his God or worship by worshiping the Persian emperor or die.
Yeah.
Now Daniel, he trusted God. He faithfully, publicly prayed to God. And the consequence for this was that he would be thrown into a pit of hungry lions.
Right.
Yet Daniel trusted in God that one way or another he would get him through even this. And God showed his faithfulness to Daniel by sparing him from this. When the Persian king came and saw Daniel was still alive the next day, The Persian king issued a decree to the entire empire. This is the Persian Empire, the largest empire that had been on the world to that day. Millions of people. And you know what that decree said? That they must all revere Daniel's God.
Right.
Through Daniel's actions, millions of people heard about God.
That's right.
You know, I hope I didn't spoil the whole book of Daniel for you, but you did have a long time to read it.
Yes.
You know, what would have happened if Daniel hadn't first trusted God in a matter of food? You know, it was not an easy life, but each time Daniel trusted in God, God proved faithful. It must have been scary to be taken into captivity. It must have been scary to give the king bad news multiple times. It must have been scary to refuse what's presented to you by royal officials. It must have been scary to survive the hostile invasion of another empire, to be arrested for prayer and have to stare into the eyes of a hungry lion. It was not an easy life, necessarily, but it was a full life. Daniel was not a slave to sin or to his captors.
Yes.
He made an impact. He inspired others, and he lived without guilt or shame. What more could we ask for? Think of the amazing stories that Daniel and his friends would share with each other as they gathered around and talked about the latest episode they had of what happened when they trusted in God.
Yeah.
God wants this for all of us as well.
Yeah.
So what's your latest story about trusting in God?
Come on.
Letting him prove faithful. What's your latest story about trusting in God? And if you can't think of anything recent,
Uh-oh.
maybe it's time to make some.
Yeah. Come on.
Wow.
All right, how do we apply this? We need to resist the pressures of our modern Babylon that pressure us to conform to sinfulness, but instead to boldly honor God and enjoy our lives the way he wants us to.
Yeah.
Let's leave behind the shame and guilt of sin that holds us in captivity and prevents us from the freedom that Jesus came to give us.
Yeah.
Here's some questions. Let's ask ourselves to apply this. In what ways do we need to stop conforming to the sinful sides of our culture?
Wow.
Are you a slave to some secret sin?
Come on.
Something that you
Andrew.
just can't kick?
Come on.
What popped into your head right now?
Come on.
Do you feel pressure to watch the latest shows or movies that you'd be ashamed to watch in front of some of the others here?
Come on.
Do you spend so much time scrolling on your notification machine that you don't even have time for God or the other people he put in your life?
Come on, Andrew. Wow.
Let's get open about that sin that popped into our head today. Let's make a decision to honor God in the area that you are convicted about. In what ways do you need to engage more in this world to make it a better place, be a light into our society?
Okay.
Maybe inviting a friend out to a Bible talk or a house church or a devotional so that they can hear the word and they can meet somebody who is trying to live an amazing life for God, something worth imitating.
Wow.
Come on.
Maybe we need to be more generous with our wealth or even our hospitality. And maybe, like Aiden, we need to go on a mission trip so we can impact other people.
Yeah.
Let's make a decision to honor God in one of these areas today. And let's get advice from a spiritual person about how to engage spiritually in this world.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up in Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. You guys, was Daniel a slave to fear? Was Daniel a slave to sin? Was Daniel even a slave to his captors? No, Daniel was free to trust in God. Daniel was free to live a rewarding and fulfilling and abundant life. You guys, I imagine that Daniel, as he's on this 700-mile forced march to Babylon, at the end of a long day of marching, when it gets dark and they finally let him rest, he'd sit down and he'd catch his breath. And he looks up at the stars. This is more stars than any of us have ever seen. And he starts counting them. You know, I think he loses track around 100 or so as he starts to think about the promises that God gave to Abraham. That Abraham's descendants would be even more numerous than the stars in the sky. And Daniel is among those descendants. And he would also think about the other promise that God said, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all people on earth will be blessed through you.
Yeah.
You guys, Daniel trusted that it was not over.
Right.
Daniel trusted that God would fulfill his promises to Abraham, to Abraham's descendants, and to all of God's people. Daniel and a few young friends there under those stars, they made a pact together. They got together and made a pact. They said, whatever we find there in Babylon, we will trust God no matter what. We will trust God and honor him no matter what we find there in Babylon.
Yes.
Last we hear from Daniel, he's in the Persian Empire. He's thriving and prospering. He's serving under emperors who called themselves the King of Kings. He's a just and righteous administrator, and through his actions, blessing millions of people and giving each one of them a chance to hear about God. We may not all be destined for Daniel's exact future, but do not think that your role in history is insignificant. As in John 14:12, Jesus says his disciples would do even greater things than he. God's promises are for us as well. I want to leave you with this thought before we're dismissed. Jesus came not so we can continue in the shame and guilt and despair that come with a life of sin, but so that we could live life to the absolute fullest. A life lived in Christ's amazing freedom. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.